I read your trip reports. It's like we did this with our 7-year-old, our 7 and 9-year-old, and I always kind of wonder, what were the kids saying then? And
I don't want to hear their story.
We're not going to give you their name.
The not climbing Cooneys.
Yeah. Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, we sit down with the founders of Climb13ers.com, the Climbing Cooneys.
Well, Eric, I am really interested to talk to the Cooneys today. Actually, let's be honest with our listeners. We talked to them a few days ago, and we're recording this a little later, so we've already had this conversation, but I was so thrilled to talk to the Cooneys.
Agreed.
For our listeners that don't know, this is a couple, Tim and Carrie Cooney, who have hiked all of the ranked 13ers and 14ers in the state of Colorado, all 637 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They have hiked probably a significant number of 12ers. They have done, in the non-hiking world, some serious cycling trips. They've ridden big centuries with thousands and thousands of feet of elevation gain in a single day.
Mm-hmm.
They've also got a website devoted to photography, which you'll hear about in the interview. And probably most significantly, they've dragged their kids up a lot of these peaks. Eric was the one that alerted me to the Cooneys a few years ago, and I started to use their website as a resource. And anyone that goes to climb13ers.com will see immediately that it's really the most comprehensive 13er hiking website there is. If you go to 14ers.com, you can find some trip reports on some peaks. It can be hit or miss. Our previous guest, Laura Clark, the Wild Wanderer, is very rapidly approaching comprehensiveness in terms of her website and guides. I think between Laura Clark and the Climbing Cooneys at climb13ers.com, you really have like a total picture of a lot of really hard to hike and rare peaks. And I was just interested to hear their story. I don't know about you, Eric, but I find people like that are so driven to be utterly fascinating.
I agree with everything you just said, Zach. Their website, climb13ers.com, very comprehensive, like you said, very functional. There's a lot of ways that you can get to any route description that you want. But like you said, they were just really intriguing because of everything that they've accomplished and the fact that they've documented all of it. Like, it's all on their website. Like you said, if you want to find a route description for a 13er, they've got it there. And they readily admit it may not be the best one, but it's going to be a good one. It's one that they can rely on and say, hey, we did this and it works. It goes. So I think between them and Laura Clark, we've got great resources for the 13ers in Colorado. And yeah, I was looking forward to seeing just how did they approach the website? How did they approach hiking in general? And like you said, get some of their stories. And there's some great stories in there. It was a lot of fun chatting with them.
You guys listening won't get to see them, but Tim and Carrie are just incredibly sweet people, easy to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of what makes them such great guests for us is, although they've hiked all these peaks and done a lot of real serious climbing, Carrie readily admits that they were always looking for the easiest way.
Mm-hmm.
And these are not Olympic level athletes. These are regular folks that are doing this on the weekend and just incredibly persistent. And let's not fool ourselves, incredibly fit.
Oh, yeah.
One other thing before we go to the interview that you guys should know about them being persistent and fit. We've tried to schedule this interview for a few months.
That's true.
And
yeah.
it was one of the complications was Carrie had surgery on her shoulder.
Yep.
And so she sat very contentedly with her arm propped up throughout this entire interview. You won't hear her say anything about it or complain about it, but I just thought it was very noble that they joined us even after, I think, just a few weeks after Carrie had her surgery. So
Agreed.
I really appreciated that.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, she was definitely a trooper and didn't even let, like, if they had not mentioned that surgery happened, I would have never guessed. Like there would have been no clue that something major had happened to have to correct her shoulder. So yeah, really fun to talk to and was really looking forward to chatting with them. And on that note, let's get into our interview with them. Well, we are here today with the Climbing Cooneys, the founders of climb13ers.com and highestgroundphotography.com. Tim and Carrie Cooney, welcome to the Greens and Blues podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here and to meet you two.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you both here. Eric and I have been longtime followers of your website, occasionally used your guides for 13ers for my own hiking purposes. I'm really interested to talk with you guys today. So our first question, just to kind of start with, where are you both from and how did you get your start hiking?
Well, let's let Carrie go first.
I'm basically from Colorado, call myself a native. I was 5 when my parents moved here from California, the Denver area, and all of our family vacations were in the mountains. Both my parents just really liked the outdoors, and there was 4 of us kids, so taking long cruises or extravagant vacations just wasn't ever in the works. So we'd load up the truck and go camping pretty much all of our vacations. So I grew up just being out in the outdoors and always liked that and continued that.
I grew up on the Texas Gulf Coast, and I tell people it was so flat there, I had to drive 90 miles to find a hill 50 feet high. When I was growing up, my dad was a music educator, public school system. He had an 11-month contract. That month that we had off was July every year. And my mother loved Colorado, even though she was born and raised in Texas around Houston. And we would spend a month camping in Colorado every summer. And that's where I kind of developed a love for the state. Both of my parents quit their jobs in 1974 and left the Gulf Coast and moved to the Denver area. And I followed them a year later. So I've been in Colorado since 1975.
The big question is, in the early 70s, we find you both in Colorado. How did you two meet each other and how did you begin hiking?
Oh, basically through the church we both attended that we met each other, and through youth group activities. Quickly found out that we both liked hiking and being out in the mountains, and that was a common ground to begin things off.
There's actually a very interesting story behind what brought us together.
Mm-hmm.
You want it?
If you lead in with that, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We can't not have it now.
Yeah.
Well, the title of the story is I literally took a fall for him.
Okay. Well, even better now. I'm ready.
The church we were involved in, I was kind of heading up a career kind of group. And a week before Christmas, we had gotten a bunch of us together, went up to St. Mary's Glacier and did some sledding and stuff around the glacier, and had a lot of fun. So on Christmas Eve, thought, well, let's try this again. And the only people I could round up that time were her and my sister and another guy who was attending Juilliard Institute of Music, I think, in New York, who was back to Denver for the holidays. So it was just 4 of us, and we went up to St. Mary's Glacier again. Lee and I had ice axe and crampons, and we wanted to get a little practice in. So we left my sister and Carrie down on the lake, which is frozen at that time. And Lee and I went up a pretty steep snow-filled gully and disappeared out of sight. And we about 45 minutes later, we circled around, came back down towards the lake. We could see a puff of smoke coming up out of the willows. Went over there, found some guy trying to start a fire, and my sister is just shaking almost uncontrollably. They told us that Carrie had been in an accident and they were carrying her down to cars to take her to the nearest hospital. Now I'll let her tell her part of it.
So I got the harebrained idea, well, that looks pretty cool, climbing up that glacier. I'll just follow, in their footsteps. I did not have ice axe or crampons or anything like that. Kind of realized, oh, this getting kind of steep and slippery, and there was some rocks to the side. So I said, well, I'd rather hang on to some rocks and get some secure footing. But it wasn't secure because they were covered with a glaze of ice. So I picked up on the rocks, and voila, down I went.
That's all she remembered.
Hit my head.
Did you end up in the lake, or did you just?
I slid
just
down,
fall?
ended up on the lake. Yeah, just.
Oh wow.
Yeah, she
Okay.
slid about 200 feet down.
Oh dear.
Holy cow.
Yeah, leaving a trail of blood behind.
That's a heck of a first date, Tim.
Yeah.
So
Knocked all the sense out of me, maybe. I don't know.
She hasn't recovered since.
well, we usually end this story with, this is how she really fell for me. Lee and I caught up with the people taking her down to the cars. We went down to Idaho Springs. There was a clinic there. And in the clinic, what she had done was gashed the top of her head open. And so her scalp. And they had her in the back. A nurse came out after a little while and said, is there somebody sitting here named Tim? And I said, yeah, I'm Tim. And well, she's asking for Tim. So I went back there, and the doctor was trying to stitch her back together. I quit counting after 40 stitches.
Oh wow.
Oh man.
And then had the pleasure of taking her home that evening, Christmas Eve, and explaining to her folks.
To her parents. Oh gosh.
Well, thus began a life of adventure.
Fortunately, there's been nothing near as dramatic since.
Yeah.
You got it all out of the way in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much in that. It sounds like you're from the very beginning, though. You guys were going outdoors and enjoying that. Well, I don't know if enjoying is the right word there, but experiencing that together. And did that kind of set the tone for everything thereafter? Have you guys always been, well, not that respect, making me stumble over my words here. Were you active from then on? It seems like everything that I've ever read of your trip reports, you guys are always doing this stuff together. And that's that's what's so beautiful about it is that you guys are really a tandem. So from then on, did you guys start hiking together and going outside a lot together?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, pretty much. So.
At first, it was mostly hiking, and by the time we started dating each other, I'd probably already climbed about half the 14ers.
Really?
And so she willingly joined in with me on that. And then, so that meant I had to kind of backtrack some and take her up ones that I had already done. I finished up the 14ers in 1983, and she finished in 1987.
And Carrie, did you finish them with Tim?
Well, my last 14er was solo. So she wasn't with me on that last 14er, if that's what you meant.
But Carrie did all of hers with you?
Yes.
So along the way, I mean, some of these 14ers are obviously quite difficult, especially if you're doing them in the late 70s, early 80s, where a lot of the time there's not the same kind of trail network or certainly route beta that most people are familiar with. So where did you guys pick up climbing skills along the way and the kind of ability to do these things?
I think her answer will be short.
Just by doing it, I guess. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with the exposure and the difficulty and whatnot. And more for him. I guess you'll tell how you learned a little bit of rock climbing techniques. So, he taught me what little we knew to get us up and down where we needed to be. So.
Yeah.
My side of it, I developed an interest in mountaineering. My dad was kind of an armchair mountaineer, so he liked to read books.
Mm-hmm.
And probably early middle school, I started reading books about mountaineering too. And that combined with our trips to Colorado in the summer. And also I was in Boy Scouts. I was an Eagle Scout. So that, acquired a lot of camping and, survival skills through that.
Did you go to Philmont Scout Ranch?
Never went to Philmont, but the troop I was in we called ourselves a camping troop. So once a month, we always did a weekend camp out someplace. This was always in Texas again.
Yep.
So it was rare that it never wound up in any mountains.
Your story is really familiar, Tim. My dad was from the Waco area, Waco and Fort Worth area.
Okay.
As a kid, and he did Boy Scouts, and like you fell in love with Colorado going there as a kid, especially to Philmont Scout Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably by the early 80s he had done at least maybe half the 14ers too. So I think that there may be something generational about being a Midwestern kid and falling in love with the mountains and Colorado that a lot of people can identify with at that point.
Yeah. My dad was also a Boy Scout and Eagle Scout as well. So, that probably contributes more to the whole picture. I started learning technical rock climbing. Basically, I was self-taught. I just went and got books. And this was when I was still in college in Austin, Texas, and found another friend who was interested in doing the same. And we just went out and started practicing on the limestone cliffs. And there's a place about an hour, 2 hours from Austin called Enchanted Rock. There was a granite outcrop dome, and we could go out there and practice rappelling and, some basic rock climbing skills and things like that. Of course, that was back in the days when a chalk was a new thing back then. So pretty much self-taught.
Wow. So you guys are a couple, maybe even married at this point. When does the idea of hiking all the 14ers become, I dare say, an obsession or a thing that you both deeply want to do and want to do together? When does that start to happen for you guys?
Well, you wanted to climb the 14ers as soon as you moved here, right?
Yeah. 6 months before I moved to Colorado, I was anticipating that move, and I was getting the Denver Post down in Texas, the Sunday edition. And there was one Sunday that there was like a 2-page article in the Post about the climbing Smith family. The article about the Smith family, this was in 1974, early 75, when the Post wrote about this family. This father and 3 sons. The father, I don't remember how, but he had lost one arm. And the summer before, they had gone out and climbed all of the Colorado 14ers, plus all of the California 14ers, plus Mount Rainier. So they did all the 14ers in the lower 48, and they had done all of that in a certain number of days total, I think 60 days or something like that.
Wow. Holy cow.
And I read that article, and as soon as I read that became my goal. When I moved to Colorado, I was going to start the 14ers. Going to do them all, and I wanted to break their record.
I was going to ask if that was a goal of yours, was to do the same thing they did, or even faster.
Yes.
Did you break the record?
No, not at all. I met her. We had 2 kids.
Life gets in the way of such record-setting accomplishments.
That's right.
Yeah. So wasn't actually part of our vows, but probably part of marrying him was which was fine with me. I mean, all the camping and stuff we did growing up, we never did climb mountains, but we took a lot of hikes and everything. So I was used to being up high, and the idea of, okay, well, you're climbing mountains, I can do that too. So sounds like a good deal.
Well, I had to move to Colorado to find my wife and climbing partner. And
Right.
that's the cool
That's
thing.
right.
I married my climbing partner, so you didn't have to go looking for one.
So it sounds like by kind of the mid to late 80s, you had both summited all of the 14ers. Was there a transition towards
the 13ers at that point, or were you already thinking about 13ers ahead of that?
No, we were not thinking about them. We like to describe to people how we got roped into doing 13ers. My reason for coming to Colorado was to attend a seminary in Denver. So I have a Master of Divinity degree from that.
Was it Denver Seminary?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of my professors, his name was Bob Alden, probably my second year in seminary, came to me one day and he's looking for a lifestyle change. And he said, I heard you climb 14ers. I would like you to take me and my son up a 14er. So he became one of our primary climbing partners. And then he was friends with another seminary student and graduate ultimately. I'll give you his first name. His name was Fred, but he kind of an off the grid kind of guy. So he probably doesn't want me to say his full name. For the most part, if it was an easy peak, she and I would just do it ourselves. But anytime, well, Bob Alden, his wife made him promise that he would never climb alone. So Bob finished the 14ers the same year and the same month that I did. And he wanted to keep climbing. He wanted to do like at least all the named peaks in the top half of the 13ers. And so he was always calling us up trying to get a partner to go with him. So that's kind of how we got roped into going in onto 13ers. And we didn't have any goal of doing them. We were just going because Bob was inviting us. You know, by that point, it's in your blood. You can't get rid of it. It's a disease, you know.
Well, after doing the top 100 and 200, you know, with Bob and Fred, it's like, well, okay, we need to get a plan here and just get them all done.
On your website, it says, you know, you start ticking off these. You did the top 100 by what year?
1994, and then we finished the 200 highest 1995. So we were kind of together.
Very quickly, you start ticking them off, and then the top 300s just a few years after that.
Right.
And when did you guys finish suppose this is all the ranked 13ers?
Yes.
What, 635 of them?
At the time, 637.
Okay, 637 of them at what point had you guys done all of those?
2013.
August 3rd, 2013.
Okay, wow.
Took 25 years.
Yeah, so you're averaging
20.
In the 20s.
In the 20s.
Warriors, we only had weekends and my 1 week of vacation, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For our listeners that don't know, you did a lot of these with your kids.
Yes.
So when did that start? When did it become a kind of not just a couple, but a family that was doing these things?
Well, our kids were 4 and 6 when they did their first 14er.
Which was that?
Sherman.
Mount Sherman. So
it's a good choice for a 4 and a 6-year-old.
Yeah, that's when they started.
What was the allure of bringing your kids on all these amazing hikes?
The allure. That's an interesting choice of words.
or maybe what was the reasoning?
Because we wanted to climb, and we figured, well, you know, finding babysitters was kind of tough.
Yeah.
You know?
We had imposed on both sets of parents enough, you know, or grandparents.
Or friends, you know. During the years, we would have to take week-long backpack trips, you know, when the kids were still younger. We still had some friends in Denver that were willing to watch the kids between them and the grandparents, but you can't do that a whole lot.
So what was that like? Were your kids willing? Like, I read your trip reports. It's like, we did this with our 7 and 9-year-old. And I always kind of wonder, what were the kids saying then? You know,
I don't want to hear their story.
You know,
We're not going to give you their name.
the not climbing Cooneys.
Yeah.
I just have this sense of like you'll say, you know, it took 4 hours to go from bottom to top. And I'm thinking, Dang, those kids were in good shape. So
They were.
what was that like to hike with your kids that much, and what were their feelings about it?
For the most part, they were okay with it. Of course, the older they got, once they got towards the middle school age and stuff, it was like, really, mom and dad, we have to go with you,
Well, that was more the daughter.
Yeah, our daughter was the older one.
Yeah.
And when she got to that age, sometimes we would leave her if it was just an overnight, when she got the high school age and whatnot. Our son, for a while, he had some altitude sickness problems, and it wasn't real pleasant for him getting up in the cold mornings. Neither of the kids liked getting up when it was cold in the morning. So that was the biggest challenge. By the time he was in middle school, like he kind of took off and started enjoying it, and we could hardly keep up with him.
Yeah, when he was 12 years old, he found his own motivation.
Mm.
And there was one of the 13ers we were doing that was going to be my 200th. There was one over there by Tabawash and Chavano.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were getting close to the summit, he just started surging ahead of me, just proving that he was faster than his dad. And then he got up there to the summit, and there's the summit cairn. And he politely just kind of stood off to the side, waiting for me to come up.
You've been surpassed, Dad.
Yeah.
And knowing how fit you are, that means that kid was really cooking at that point.
Good.
Yeah.
Still has the motivation.
Really? Has he continued to hike?
Yes, and he has 3 kids and his wife, and they're out there doing peaks now too.
Okay, so there are multiple generations of climbing Cooneys.
Yes, there are 3 generations.
Wow.
That's
So
awesome.
I'd love to hear like some of the joys of hiking with your kids. I think we all are aware, if we're parents, of how hard that can be sometimes. But did you have moments of real joy or pride when doing that, other than your kid, passing you going up a lonely bicentennial in the lower Sawatch?
I think there's a quiet joy, if you will, in seeing them develop, and both of them. There's one son, one daughter, and they both developed a true appreciation for the outdoors. That's not something you jump up and down about and go yippee, but it's a quiet joy.
I think they appreciate the memories too. I mean, and there were good times. We had a lot of good trips, and yeah.
Is there a trip that in particular that stands out to you guys as like a golden moment?
I don't know about a golden moment, but we did one up into that Pole Creek Cataract Lake area. That was a backpack trip. That was several days out there with them. I think that was one of the first really good backpack trips we had with them. Seemed like there was more bonding that occurred on that particular one.
Yeah, just the camaraderie developed, between my son and daughter too. There'd be a few times that, if they weren't able to or didn't want to go do the second or third peak we wanted to do, they could hang around together, learn to trust each other. And
mm-hmm. Aren't mom and dad kind of crazy?
I'm sure they.
So at some point here too, a couple other things seem to come along, like cycling. I've noted on your website, you both talk about doing some truly huge bike rides with a lot of elevation gain and a lot of mileage. When did that start to kind of enter into the picture for you guys as a couple?
Well, even before we moved to Grand Junction here, we had one bike and we would take turns just making a kind of a loop around the neighborhood and whatnot. And our main motive for the biking was keep in shape for mountain climbing. So you could cycle, you still using a little different muscles, but just overall conditioning to keep us in shape for the climbing. When we moved here to Grand Junction, it's a great area for cycling. We have the Colorado National Monument. We've got a lot of the Fruta area to the west of us that's just more open farmland and far less traffic to deal with. It was much more pleasurable than anywhere in Denver.
Way better than the Front Range.
Yeah.
I would say about the time we moved to Grand Junction, which was 1990, by that time we both had our own bikes, and biking had become something that we enjoyed for itself.
Yeah.
You know?
Not just as a means to an end, but an end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did some mountain biking too, a little bit. We do a lot more road biking, but being close to out in the Utah area, some of the mountain biking, the Slick Rock bike trail, was that was a good family excursion. You know, the kids would
They had fun.
they had fun out there in that desert country on the bikes. So, and then again, that's something that we kind of did as a family for a few years. They had a ride here in Grand Junction called Tour of the Valley, and we would do that. I know our daughter went with us one time. Did Sean ever do it?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
I think he did.
I think, a couple of years that would be something we could do as a family. You know, they had 30, 60, 70 mile, so we'd take the kids on the 30-mile loop. And
well, you would, and I'd do the 100-mile.
Yeah.
I'm
getting the sense here, Tim, you've got one gear, and that's go.
Well, it took a few years to convince her that she could do a century ride. And so that Tour of the Valley here in Grand Junction, I finally convinced her one year to try that. And she did it, and she did it quite well. And from that point on, I think we became equals in cycling as well.
It sounds like you both are extraordinarily motivated and fit. I mean, I don't know about you, but if my first experience hiking with somebody was to fall down a glacier and cut my head open, and then it's like, no, I'm good. I'm ready for more of this. I think internal drive there, right? What are some of the big rides that you guys have done?
The biggest one we've ever done, and this is probably the hardest thing we've ever done athletically. It's called the Tour of the California Alps, but the Death Ride is the nickname for it. One-day ride. It's out of a little town called Markleyville in Alpine County, that's south of Lake Tahoe. And you do 129 miles one day, 5 mountain passes for a total elevation gain of 15 to 16,000 vertical.
Oh my gosh.
So for us, that's the hardest thing we ever do. We tell people that's probably like a mountain stage of the Tour de France.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But how old were you guys when you did that?
This was 14 years ago, I think. Yeah.
We
So
did
I would have been 58.
We did it in 2010. So long time.
Yeah.
ago.
So doing that in your late 50s, that's a heck of an accomplishment.
Wow.
And then at the same time, you're also knocking out doing all the 13ers, or you had done all the 13ers at that point, correct?
No.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where in all this does the idea for a hiking guide / website come into the picture?
That was one we batted around quite a bit. At the time it first entered our minds, there was not a comprehensive book on all the 13ers. I think you showed it to me. You have the Roach's book on the 13ers, but that only takes you through about the top 200, right?
It's actually just the top 100.
Even less than
okay.
that. I think it's the centennials. Yep.
And so, trying to do a book on, there's 584 13ers, and trying to do a single book on something, that would be a fat book. You're not going to want to take that backpacking. And also we had consulted with, I don't know if you ever knew Bob Martin and Mike Garrett.
Yes, I've got their Green 13ers book, but it's only a selection of some of the ones that they did as well.
Still, right. It's only the higher ones.
Yeah.
And we had talked to them about, do you make any money at this? And they said, oh yeah, once a year we get a royalty check that gives us enough money to take our wives out to dinner once. And there's another man here in town that's done several publications through the Colorado Mountain Club Press. And same thing, as far as he only makes pennies for all the effort and everything he does to publish a book. And, the way technology has gone, we just finally decided that it made a whole lot more sense to do a website than a print book.
So when did that website come out?
I worked here in town at a family-owned wholesale greenhouse, and in 2013, the owners of the greenhouse put it up for sale, and that put most of us employees out of work. And at that point, I was already 62 years old, and we're asking the question, okay, what do I do at this age? Do I try to retrain for a new job or what? Yeah. And so we decided let's look at what we've been doing all these years, all the fun we've been having, the adventures, and see if we can do something with that. And so we decided to go ahead and proceed with the climbing website. And then the photography was also an outgrowth from that same decision-making process. And so that's how we started that as well.
So your 13er website is utterly comprehensive and it's easy to navigate. It's great. I hope everybody takes a look at it. When you are doing a guide to the peak, are you scouting out all the possible routes, or go through your process of like how you think about leading a fellow hiker who you don't know and can't talk to, but who's only reading this one report? What are you thinking about in terms of how they interact with this, and what experience are you bringing to it that they can kind of feel in that trip report?
Our son did all the technical aspect of the site.
Oh, he's good.
He's a web designer. Okay.
Yeah.
And it really was advantageous to have somebody like him who also climbed, who could understand what we wanted, what our goals were in creating this site. Our basic goal was not to put every possible route out there, which obviously we don't do. What we wanted to do was to be able to say, we've done all of these. This is how we did it. We came back alive. So you have at least one good route that worked.
If you want another route, you do the research.
And we do encourage people, check out the other sites and stuff like that, because our routes are not definitive. It's, and in many cases, you probably could have done something that we did. We probably wound up doing it the hard way when there's a much easier way to do it.
My experience has been the exact opposite, Tim. What I've done is I go out and I look at your website and other places, and a few times I've been like, I don't want to do it the way the Cooneys did it. I want to do it this other way. And invariably, I get to the summit or I come back to my car and I think, I should have done it the way they did it, because that's way more logical than the way that I did it. I've had that experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're no, thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, and as climbers, we wanted to do about the easiest route we could. We wanted to get up and down the thing. We weren't out to pick the most difficult route.
But also, you're picking logical lines. And like I used your guide for Taylor Mountain this past year, or I should have used it. I ended up using another one, and I ended up looking at the route that you guys did. And I was like, dang, that was way easier than what I just did here. And I've had that feeling a few times. So is it just because you guys have done this so many times that you know how to read a map, you know how to look at a peak, you've done enough beta on other peaks that you can pick out the best routes on these things? Is that what's going on here?
He's a map guru.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not seeing it behind me, but there's maps all over this basement. I have a map brain. Okay. She has more trouble with them as far as the 3D aspect, Nowadays, with the advent of Google Earth and some other sites like that, I make use of those. Just if we're thinking about going up a certain peak, and a lot of what we're doing now, there's no beta out there on them, 12ers and stuff like that, or virtually nothing. Yeah. And so look at the map, go to Google Earth, and kind of pick out what looks like to us will work and what's most accessible for our vehicle, think factors like that.
Are you starting to do the 12ers now?
We're not.
It's not a list, but we can't. I mean, that's our life in the summer is climbing peaks. So we'll go to an area and anything from 12,000, even some 11ers, but we'll just go to an area and climb peaks. So we don't have a list. We're not ticking things off, except we have done the top 700 highest.
There's not a list, but there may be a spreadsheet somewhere. I'm just saying.
Oh, you got that right.
So you said along the way, photography was just a natural outgrowth of a lot of your adventuring. And you've got a photography website. Some of your photography is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Where does that start to become an interest? I mean, you guys are just picking up things as you're going along, but where does photography start to become not just a thing that you're doing while you're hiking, but where you're actually intending to go take great photographs?
Probably started when we decided to do the site.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess you've always had a little more interest in the photography than honeymoon and the camera and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I just kind of picked it up again along the way, going, okay, well, if he's shooting, I might as well. I had more of the Instamatic type cameras for the longest time, He's off doing his thing with all of his lenses. I'll snap a few here. My main motive was I like to do scrapbooking, so I need just some quick snapshots for the scrapbooking, or I need to make sure the kids are in a few of these,
Not just nature shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was more of what I did, at least early on.
But I have to say, in the early days, we used to do slides and some prints, and we were usually pretty disappointed in what we got back because we were always just sending them out to King Supers or wherever to get it processed. And for a while, we pretty much got away from doing photography other than like her wanting stuff for the scrapbook. When the digital age came in and got our first digital camera in 2007, that just opens up a whole new world. You can take all the pictures you want. You don't have to worry about the cost of how much film you're eating up.
Delete.
We had the church that we attended in Denver. There was a man there who was an amateur photographer who did a lot of landscape photography, and he put on these beautiful shows. He and his wife were outdoor people. They would put on these shows at church, slideshows of where they've gone and stuff like that. And that he was, I think, very motivating to us to eventually kind of head in that direction.
Are there favorite places you like to go for pictures? I noticed on your website there's a few spots that kind of appear multiple times, that some in like the Holy Cross Wilderness that are sensational high alpine lake pictures, and some other places. Are there some places that you found yourself with the excuse of taking pictures going back to just to photograph?
Yeah, definitely. The Weminuche Wilderness, largest one in Colorado, largest wilderness. And we've made so many trips in there over the years. The last time I tried counting, I know we came up with more than 20 trips backpack trips that we've done in there.
Oh, wow.
And there was at least one trip we did probably not too many years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, where we specifically went in to do photography for that trip. And we only had one peak goal on that trip, and that was to do peak 10. But other than that, we were there to take photographs.
Have you ever been to the Ruby Creek drainage to take pictures up there? Because I know that's a really common area
Yeah. I hate to say this, but we're probably too old to go back now.
I don't buy that for a second. But
I actually kind of wanted to go back to the 13ers website, because on some of the route descriptions that I've seen there, I noticed a note, climbed in 1982 or something like that. And so if 30 years later the website came around, I'm assuming there were some pictures that may have come from those 80s trips, but were there difficulties in trying to conjure up, okay, how did we do this route, or how did I do this route, or what pictures can I use? Like, were there any difficulties in kind of going back decades to try and put some of those route descriptions together?
A little bit, but we finished the 14ers in 1987. By 1990, we had moved here to Grand Junction, and starting in 1990, I started keeping a written record of everything we climbed.
Okay.
And so that's my memory. Then the photos that we would take, they would help remind us of certain things. And it's really handy with the digital photography. You should see my computer file. I have a folder that says mountains, okay, and then I have that broken into 13ers and 12ers, and every peak has its own folder. So I can look up a specific peak. I can look at the photos we took on that trip, and being able to see those photos really helps me go back and write the account as well.
Yeah, if you're like a lot of hikers, I think a lot of us have photographic memory for once it gets conjured, we can remember what we did along the hike and how it felt along the way. Is that similar for you?
Very much so.
Yeah, for him. Yeah, I rely on his memory. My brain doesn't work that way. He looks at the maps, he plans the trips, and he gets it ingrained. And especially when I was still working and he wasn't. I'd come home from work Friday night, we'd hop in the car and off we go. Okay, honey, where are we going? He'd have it all in his mind as to how it would look, and I would just follow. So it didn't get quite as ingrained in me.
That was part one of our conversation with the Climbing Cooneys. We'll continue our conversation with the Climbing Cooneys in our next episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, if you want to reach us, you can email us at greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com, find us on Facebook, or find me at X at NMHikerPerson. Thank you all so much for listening, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.